You didn't lose her because you weren't nice enough. You lost her the moment you started asking instead of deciding. The moment you softened your tone, lowered your standards, and waited for permission to be a man. That's how most men fall today, not from betrayal, not from failure, but from gradual surrender. Surrendering their frame, their voice, their authority. Not because she demanded it, because he offered it in exchange for affection. This is the disease of modern masculinity. Men who believe compliance is virtue. Men who confuse submission with connection. Men who think love means making themselves easier to love. Now here's where Machiavelli enters. He didn't write about dating, but he did write about power. About what happens when rulers get soft. When they trust too easily. When they try to please the people they were meant to lead. And if you think that doesn't apply to modern relationships, think again. This video will strip the illusion. No therapy talk. No feel-good advice. Just pure strategy. 7 techniques through the ruthless mind of Machiavelli. All of them are directed at men, and each one is designed to help a man test a woman, not as a game or a tool for control, but as a way to clarify her character, her motivation, and her true loyalty. Let's begin. Most men lose not because they're weak, but because they never inspect what they're walking into. They try to win women without dismantling their illusions. They attempt to lead without ever testing loyalty. They want to wear the crown without checking who actually bows to it. And so, without even realizing it, they are slowly devoured by the very thing they refuse to examine. Let's be honest, women are not chaotic by nature. They are strategic. Not because they're manipulative, but because survival taught them to be. A woman who cannot test a man's strength cannot feel safe with him. And that test doesn't come in the form of one dramatic moment. It comes through hundreds of small, quiet cues. From the very first conversation, she's watching, not just what you say, but why you say it. She pays attention to how much you flinch when she's late, how quickly you forgive when she breaks a promise, how eagerly you bend to accommodate her contradictions. This is where technique number 1, passive pressure testing, begins. It's never announced. She'll create tension, minor delays, vague disagreements, subtle provocations, and wait. Your reaction becomes the measurement of your internal structure. If you respond with anxiety, appeasement, or performative calmness, you've already failed. What you call grace or emotional openness, she may interpret as softness, unearned, untested softness. And the truth is, softness without backbone invites no respect. Machiavelli warned, a prince who is not himself shrewd cannot be well counseled. Meaning, if you can't see through the dynamic in front of you, you have no business leading it. This is where most men fail. Not because they lack strength, but because they never learned to apply it in silence. They think affection can be negotiated. They think love will grow from pleasing behavior. But Machiavelli makes it brutally clear, it is much safer to be feared than loved, when one of the two must be lacking. If this hits something real, don't scroll past it. Share it with someone who's still asleep. Subscribe, new insights drop daily. Spend 20 minutes on your commute and leave with a sharper mind. You don't need more noise. You need precision. Here we enter technique number 2, the fear-respect split. A woman may love the man she can influence, but she only respects the one who remains unmoved. And between the two, only respect anchors loyalty. So when she tests, by being late, by mentioning her ex, by dismissing your opinion, she's not looking for drama. She's observing what governs you. Do you enforce your standard or adjust it for convenience? Do you hold your line, or silently submit to avoid discomfort? Every moment becomes a mirror. Every response is a vote. And she's not the only one watching. Because in the court of power, nothing is private. Now if you still think this is about playing games, you've already missed the point. This isn't seduction, it's structure. This isn't manipulation, it's sovereignty. The man who refuses to test is like a ruler who never inspects his borders. Eventually, he will be invaded, used, and overthrown, not with force, but with a smile. He'll call it love, and never notice the quiet erasure of his strength. Machiavelli said it plainly, everyone sees what you appear to be, few experience what you really are. And women, more than anyone, are masters of appearing soft while scanning for dominance. She may call you sweet, laugh at your jokes, show affection, and still push every boundary like a foreign power testing the edge of your territory. She will not ask, "Can I control you?" She will find out. And if you fold, if you flinch, if you explain instead of enforce, she learns everything she needs to know. That you are not the ruler. You are the ruled. This is not about paranoia. It's about clarity. You were raised to trust, not to test. Taught that love is earned through kindness, provision, and patience. That a good woman will see your good intentions. But Machiavelli would have laughed at this delusion, because where power is at stake, only a fool leads with virtue. A man who lives entirely by his professions of goodness will be destroyed among those who do not. You were not born into peace. You were born into scrutiny. And even the kindest woman does not love you for your innocence. She loves you for your gravity, for the fact that when the storm comes, you do not move. If she cries, will you fold? If she disrespects you, will you chase? If she disappears, will you wait by the door like a dog, or carry on like a man whose purpose was never built around her validation? These are not random behaviors. They're stress tests, invisible, subtle, and constant. Not announced, not explained, just quietly deployed like tripwires across the terrain of your relationship. And if you step wrong, she won't correct you. She won't even speak. She'll simply adjust, becoming colder, quieter, less engaged, until what was once affection turns into indifference. This is technique number 3, the silent audit. She's not listening to your words. She's watching for structural weakness. How quickly do you abandon your own standards just to keep her comfortable? How fast do you negotiate with your boundaries in exchange for peace? The moment she senses that your priority is to preserve her mood rather than your own direction, the power dynamic shifts, and not in your favor. But here's the deeper problem. Most men never should have gotten that far. They're trying to maintain frame in a relationship they never should have entered. If you haven't seen it yet, go watch Stop Choosing the Wrong Women, 13 Ruthless Laws by Machiavelli. The link is in the description section. It's the playbook for filtering before you step into the game. Most men don't even realize they've failed the test. They just feel the change. The warmth fades. The affection shrinks. The enthusiasm dies. And they're left confused, wondering what went wrong. But what went wrong is simple. She saw your soft core, and once seen, it cannot be unseen. Machiavelli understood this better than most. He advised rulers to simulate virtue, to appear merciful, faithful, sincere, but to never allow principle to override necessity. It is well to appear virtuous, but one must be ready to act in the opposite manner if the situation demands it. Most modern men refuse to live by this. They cling to a morality that the world, especially in intimate dynamics, simply doesn't reward. You live in a time that celebrates male softness, but quietly discards it. You're told that openness guarantees love, that emotional transparency leads to connection. But the truth is far colder. Vulnerability shown too soon isn't admired, it's marked. This is why your testing isn't about control. It's about clarity. You need to know, is she loyal because you bend to her, or because you don't? This is technique number 4, disruption of the frame. You create moments of friction, not to punish, but to observe. Say no and watch what shakes. Withdraw attention without explanation and see what remains. Speak truth, even when it's inconvenient, and listen for the silence that follows. Because silence is where her real instinct speaks. A woman who is grounded and emotionally mature won't flinch at your boundaries. She may push back, but she will respect the man who doesn't retreat. But the woman who craves power over you will escalate. She will guilt, withdraw, or dramatize, anything to test whether your strength is real or just something you perform. And this is where most men fall. Not because they lack strength, but because they lack the will to use it. You've trained yourself to please. You've been conditioned to think that resistance equals rejection. But the truth is colder than that. Pleasing guarantees rejection. Resistance reveals character. Read that again. Pleasing guarantees rejection. Resistance reveals character. That's not cruelty. That's the reality of power. The Machiavellian man does not explain himself. He does not argue. He observes. He withholds. He tests. Because anything that collapses under scrutiny was never stable to begin with. And anyone who demands affection without accountability was never there for you, only for the comfort you provided. A woman will never tell you what she respects. She'll only reveal it in what she stays for. She might say she wants honesty, until your honesty confronts her fantasy. She might claim she values kindness, until your kindness threatens her control. This is why your tests must be silent, consistent, and never explained. Because the moment you explain, you give her space to manipulate the terms. Don't explain the standard. Enforce it. Machiavelli didn't write for men who wanted to be liked. He wrote for men who wanted to rule. And he made one truth painfully clear. The first method for estimating the intelligence of a ruler is to look at the men he has around him. In your case, it's the woman beside you. Not how she looks, not how she performs when things are easy, but how she responds to resistance. That's where her truth lives. If she's only sweet when you're agreeable, only loyal when it's easy, only close when you comply, then you are not loved. You are tolerated. And only until something more interesting comes along. So let's be clear, the test is never about punishment. It's about information. If you ask nothing, she shows nothing. If you let red flags pass, she plants more. But the moment you interrupt the performance, the moment you remove the comfort, the moment you say no with calm finality, she will have no script. That's where the performance ends. And the real character begins. Will she adapt or accuse? Will she lean in or retreat? Will she offer substance, or remind you what you owe her? Her reaction is not an emotional outburst. It's your report card. Machiavelli's principle still applies, and most men still ignore it. It is not titles that honor men, but men that honor titles. It's not the role you're given that earns you respect, it's the way you carry it when pressure enters the room. And pressure always comes. The moment things get emotionally uncomfortable, when she withdraws, criticizes, cries, most men lose their footing. They confuse guilt for wisdom, tears for truth, and emotional chaos for passion. They justify disrespect in the name of patience, and abandon themselves while calling it love. But Machiavelli warned us long ago. The promise given was a necessity of the past. The word broken is a necessity of the present. She may have promised to love you, and she likely meant it. But what she promised was directed at the version of you that stood tall, unshaken, clear, grounded. The moment she saw you adjust yourself to avoid tension, yield to her moods, and center your life around keeping her emotionally regulated, something in her shifted. And it wasn't spite. It was instinct. The image of strength broke, and when that illusion shattered, so did her loyalty. Still, most men don't stop. They try harder. They become more available, more supportive, more emotionally present. They convince themselves she just needs help, that she's overwhelmed, that love means giving more. So they step into roles that were never meant to be masculine. Emotional caregiver, on-call therapist, people pleaser. And then they wrap it all in the language of virtue and call it growth. But it's not growth. It's collapse. This is where the fifth principle begins to surface, not just as advice, but as a warning. Technique number 5, pressure integrity. This is your ability to hold frame when the room heats up, to stay rooted when she's pulling, crying, accusing, shifting. Most men only have standards when no one's testing them. But the moment pressure arrives, they negotiate. They soften their voice. They break their own rules to manage her emotions. And once you've trained yourself to do that, you've already handed her the crown, because the man who folds under emotional pressure cannot be trusted to lead. But collapse doesn't always happen loudly. Often, it hides beneath the surface of good intentions. You think love means helping her feel better. That understanding her is the same as tolerating everything she does. But a Machiavellian man sees through this. He doesn't offer correction. He offers reflection. He doesn't need to attack, he holds still. He lets reality do the work. That brings us to technique number 6, the mirror test. A woman doesn't need more affection, she needs a reflection. Something clear. Something calm. Something she can measure herself against. And that mirror is you. Not reactive. Not performative. Just still, observant, and precise. When you hold frame in silence, without chasing, without correcting, without rewarding the chaos, she sees herself. And in that moment, her real nature reveals itself. At first, she won't explode. She won't call it out. She'll observe. Recalibrate. Sometimes, she'll even become softer. Kinder. More agreeable. And if you're naive, you'll think that means the test is over. But it's only beginning. Because now she's not testing whether you have strength, she's testing whether you can hold it. She's watching closely to see, is this sudden clarity a performance? A tactic? A moment of masculine theater? Or is this who you really are now? The moment you draw a boundary, you declare war on the version of her that was in control. And now, without warning, the power dynamic has shifted. She must decide, evolve or escalate. And most women, especially those addicted to control, will escalate. Not always with shouting, but with guilt. With distance. With withdrawal, passive aggression, coldness. And right here, this is where most men fall. They mistake that reaction for rejection and instantly retreat. They think her coldness means they've done something wrong. So they compromise. They apologize. They reach back out. And just like that, they've undone the entire shift. All their newfound strength crumbles at the first emotional pushback. But Machiavelli knew this trap well. Injuries must be inflicted all at once, so that their ill savor may be less. In other words, when you decide to reclaim authority, do it completely. Not in phases. Not in fragments. Don't test her 1 week and collapse the next. Don't lay a boundary on Monday and break it by Friday. Inconsistency doesn't build trust, it invites chaos. And chaos, for many women, is home turf. If you meet her volatility with your own emotional wobble, you've already lost. Understand this clearly, her resistance to your boundary is not the problem. Her reaction to your consistency is the truth. Any woman can stay composed for a day or two. Anyone can perform politeness when things are new. But how does she behave the third time you say no? When there's no emotional reward, no apology, no counteroffer. That's the moment everything becomes visible. That's when the illusion breaks, and what's left standing is real. Watch closely how she behaves when you ignore the performance. When you no longer respond to the sighs, the sideways glances, the sudden silence meant to pull you in. When you stop playing the role of entertainer, pleaser, rescuer, and quietly shift the dynamic from entertain me to prove you belong. That's when the real test begins. Most women will flinch. Some will flee. Few, the rare ones, will adapt. And those are the ones you don't chase, but observe. Slowly. Carefully. Not with paranoia, but with discernment. Not with instant trust, but with the patience to study patterns over promises. Because patterns don't lie. Affection can be faked. Words can be weaponized. But behavior over time is the final judge. This is the Machiavellian frame. A wise man ought always to follow the paths beaten by great men, and to imitate those who have been supreme. You don't need to invent new tactics. The foundation has already been laid. What you need is the discipline to refine it. You don't shout your standards into the world. You enforce them, quietly, precisely, and without apology. And you never, ever make exceptions because of how she looks, what she promises, or how badly you want to feel wanted. Because here's the truth, the test isn't just for her. Technique number 7. Self-filtering through deprivation. This is the part men avoid. The part where you sit in silence and let your neediness die. The part where you allow absence to do its job. Can you go without affection long enough to see clearly? Can you withhold validation long enough to strip away the performance? Can you deny yourself routine comfort long enough to see the woman without the mask? Most men can't. They say they want clarity, but they fold the moment she pulls away. They say they want a queen, but kneel to any woman who offers fleeting attention. Because deep down, they're not led by reason, they're driven by fear. Machiavelli saw this in politics, and it applies just as brutally in love. Men are driven by two principal impulses, either by love or by fear. And if your relationship is built on the fear of losing her, you're not in love, you're in submission. And if you fear upsetting her, you can't lead her. If your sense of purpose depends on her validation, you can't protect her. If her emotional response means more to you than your own sanity, you'll never test her, never correct her, never lead her, because you've already crowned her sovereign. That's why you don't start with grand declarations. You start small. You cancel a plan. You say no. You don't explain. You let her sit with her own emotions without rushing to fix them. You let the silence stretch without rushing to fill it. You stop performing. You start observing. And the key here is this: you don't do it with hope. You do it with detachment. Not to punish, but to understand. Not to control her, but to see her. This is how a prince governs. Not because he's cruel, but because he knows the cost of being ruled by someone else's emotions. The woman you can't test is the one who will dismantle you quietly. Not with conflict, but with charm. One skipped boundary, one forced apology, one silence you should have broken. She won't raise her voice. You'll hand over your strength piece by piece and call it connection. But the woman who passes the test is different. She doesn't flatter or collapse. She holds her shape when you hold yours. Not out of fear, but respect. And she stays beside you because you never bent to keep her. That kind of woman doesn't appear by chance. She appears when you stop chasing, stop negotiating, and start filtering with silence, discipline, and distance. Because what feels right at first, her praise, her warmth, her understanding, might be instinct, not intention. As Machiavelli warned, the vulgar crowd is always taken by appearances. Most men still are. You're not punished for choosing wrong. You're punished for refusing to test. If this hits something real, like subscribe and move with clarity. Now the choice is yours. Believe the illusion that effort earns love and boundaries are cruel. Or wake up. Test her silence, her resistance, her reaction to no. Because what collapses under pressure was never real.